Alright, this video covers section 1.4, data collection methods, and the objective is to understand different data collection methods. So when we do a statistical study, the goal is to collect data and then use that data to make a good decision. And any decision that we make is the result of collecting good data to begin with. So if the process that we collected the data is flawed, then the result is going to be questionable. Earlier we talked about different ways to sample a population, and we're usually going to use that when we're doing some sort of survey. But there's other ways to collect data. Often it depends on what the focus of the study is, and that's going to help us decide what kind of ways we're going to collect data. So there's 4 ways to collect data: through an observational study, performing an experiment, using some sort of simulation, and using a survey. So in this video we're going to talk about what these 4 data collection methods are and give some examples of good studies using these methods. So in an observational study, a researcher observes and measures characteristics of interest of part of a population, but does not change any existing conditions. So a researcher is merely observing what is happening. For instance, we can do an observational study where researchers observed and recorded the mouthing behavior of non-food objects of children up to 3 years old. So the researcher is not at all changing how the population interacts with different objects, they're just merely observing it. Okay, another way to collect data is by performing an experiment. In performing an experiment, a treatment is applied to part of a population and responses are observed. Another part of the population may be used as a control group in which no treatment is applied. I don't know if you've heard about this in any of your science classes, but often when we do an experiment, we have part of the sample using a treatment and then another part of the sample not using a treatment and maybe taking a placebo. A placebo is harmless and unmedicated treatment that is made to look like the real treatment. So the responses of the treatment group and control group are then compared and studied. The main difference between an observational study and an experiment is that in an observational study, a researcher does not influence the responses, whereas in an experiment, a researcher deliberately applies a treatment before observing the responses. For instance, we can perform an experiment in which diabetics took some sort of cinnamon extract daily, while a control group took none. And after 40 days, and the study was actually performed, and after 40 days, the diabetics who took the cinnamon reduced their risk of heart disease, while the control group experienced no change at all. So another way to collect data is through using a simulation. A simulation is the use of a mathematical or physical model to reproduce the conditions of a situation or process. The collection of data often involves the use of computers because simulations allow us to study situations that would be impractical or maybe even dangerous to create in real life, and they often save us some time and money. So one way of using a simulation is automobile manufacturers use simulations all the time with dummies to study the effects of crashes on humans. It would be very dangerous to actually have humans sit in cars while they tested the ability of the cars to sustain crashes. So that's an example of a simulation. The last method of data collection is using a survey. A survey is an investigation of one or more characteristics of a population. So most often surveys are carried out on people by asking them different kinds of questions. The most common types of surveys are done by interview, by mail, or by telephone. When we design a survey, it's really important for us to word the questions so that they don't lead to biased results. So, for example, we could have a survey conducted on a sample of female physicians to determine whether the primary reason for their career choice is financial stability. In designing this experiment, it would be acceptable to maybe make a list of reasons and ask each individual in the sample to select their choice. Okay, so those are the 4 types of methods of data collection. What I want you to do is pause the video, consider each of the following statistical studies, and write down which method of data collection you would use to collect data for each study. When you have done that, press play and check your answers with mine. Okay, welcome back. Check your answers with mine. For the first problem, I got that using a simulation would be the most reasonable because it's really impractical to create this situation and dangerous, so we would use a simulation. For the second study, I thought that we would perform an experiment. I was thinking that in the study we would want to measure the effect of a treatment, which would be eating oatmeal, and what the effect of that treatment has on a patient. For the third study, because we want to observe and measure certain characteristics of part of a population, I thought we should use an observational study. And then for the last statistical study, we could create a survey that asks maybe, do you approve of the way the president is handling his job? So you don't want it to be biased or leading in any way. Okay, that's it for methods of data collection. Thanks, and see you later.